It was one of those winter afternoons that felt like it had swallowed all sound. The snow had stopped falling, but it still clung to the bare branches outside my parents' house in South Minneapolis. I had barely taken off my coat when my mother clapped her hands and said, "Good, you're both here. Sit. Your father has something important to say." I glanced over at Logan. He'd just pulled up in his sleek electric car, still smelling like expensive cologne and confidence. His smile was lazy, assured, as if he already knew what this family meeting was about. I didn't. We sat at the old oak table, the same one we'd had since I was 10. A teapot steamed in the middle, mismatched mugs. My father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been thinking a lot about the future, about legacy and responsibility." Susan nodded, looking directly at Logan. "And about potential." I sipped my tea too quickly, burned my tongue. Something in my stomach twisted. I knew this tone. I had grown up with this tone. Gerald leaned forward. "We've decided to give Logan a gift to help him with his new startup, something to finally get his business off the ground. It's time we invested in the future of this family." I blinked. "A gift?" $500,000, my mother said softly, like she was announcing the winner of a scholarship. Logan leaned back and grinned. "That's wow. Really? And what about me?" I asked, though I hated how small my voice sounded. My father didn't flinch. "You've always been taken care of, Harper. We gave you a roof. You've lived here rent-free for years." I stared at them, my fingers curling tightly around my cup. "I paid for this roof. When the plumbing collapsed, I gave you my inheritance from Grandma June. Remember that." My mother waved her hand, brushing the fact aside like dust. "That money saved us, yes, and we've always appreciated it. But you never paid it back." "You shouldn't expect repayment from your own family," she said, her voice cooling. "Besides, you're not exactly struggling. You teach part-time. You have food. You have your room. You should be grateful." Grateful. My ears rang. The warmth from the tea seeped through my palms, but I felt cold all over. Logan stood and hugged our mother. "You won't regret this," he said. "I'll make you proud." He didn't look at me. Nobody did. I was still sitting there when they left the table to pop champagne. I listened to the cork shoot across the kitchen, heard them laugh like it was Christmas morning. I stared at the window. The snow outside hadn't melted. Neither had I. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, too heavy with the echo of clinking glasses and praise meant for someone else. I laid there on the mattress I had slept on since high school, staring at the popcorn ceiling, and the memories started crawling back. I was 17 when Mom fell off the porch and shattered her hip. Logan had just turned 13, barely tall enough to carry groceries, but still somehow the one everyone fretted over. "You'll have to be the strong one now," Dad had said. "We're counting on you, Harper." I dropped out of my early college admission and took evening shifts at the diner to keep up with the medical bills. During the day, I bathed Mom, changed her dressings, made her soups she never finished. No one ever said thank you. Logan, meanwhile, got a full ride to summer robotics camp. I remember watching him wave from the bus window, his face lit with possibility, while I wiped blood from Mom's bedsheets and cleaned the floor in silence. She once told me, in a moment of pain-laced honesty, "You're not the brilliant one, Harper, but you're steady. That's important too." I carried that line for years like a compliment until I realized it was a sentence. Steady, not brilliant, not chosen, just the one who made sure the light stayed on while Logan dreamed big enough for all of us. When he got into Stanford, they sold the second car to help with his travel expenses. I offered to drive him to the airport, but they said it would be better if they went as a family. I stayed behind and scrubbed the bathroom grout. At 24, I was juggling 2 jobs, daycare aide in the morning, waitress at night. I sent money every month to cover the small gaps Logan's scholarship didn't fill. Mom called one afternoon, voice all fake sweetness. "You're such a good sister. Not everyone would do that." I wanted to say, "You didn't ask Logan to sacrifice anything." But I didn't. Even when I found out Logan had used some of the money for a trip to Cancun with his girlfriend, I stayed quiet. "Boys will be boys," Mom had said, laughing, as if theft could be charming when wrapped in sunshine and cologne. Years later, when Logan came home after dropping out, burnt out, broke, but still adored, they threw him a welcome dinner with roast beef and wine. When I got promoted to lead at the daycare, no one mentioned it. I ate cereal alone that night. That's the thing about being the quiet one, the steady one. People stop looking at you. You become wallpaper, a warm body that fills the space between disasters. And in this house, there were always disasters, but none that ever got blamed on Logan. When I tried to move out at 30, Mom said, "You'll just come back anyway. We know you, Harper. You don't like risk." Maybe she was right. I didn't want to risk being completely alone. Even crumbs can feel like bread when you've been starving long enough. But that night, after they handed Logan $500,000 and told me to be grateful, something cracked. It wasn't loud. It didn't bleed, but it didn't heal either. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Logan sitting at the table, scrolling through design mock-ups for his eco startup. Mom stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder, like he was about to be knighted. "There's something about your generation," she said, her voice thick with pride. "So innovative, so fearless." He laughed. "Just trying to leave a mark, you know." I reached for a coffee mug, the chipped one I'd used for 10 years. No one looked up. Dad walked in, holding a manila envelope. "Harper, can you take these to the post office later? It's the paperwork for the business account." I froze. Why would I? But before I could finish, Logan chimed in, not even lifting his eyes. "Thanks, Harp. You're the best." That nickname. It used to mean something when we were little. Now it felt like someone patting a dog on the head after it fetched a ball. I didn't respond, just nodded. Because what else was there to do? By noon, the house buzzed with preparation. They were throwing Logan a party. Family, neighbors, even his old high school coach. There were balloons in green and blue, banners that read "Future of Langley Enterprises," and trays of catered food I had no appetite for. I stood by the sink, helping Susan with the punch. She poured the sparkling cranberry soda with a bright smile. "Isn't it exciting? Everything's finally coming together." "For him," I said, not meaning to speak aloud. Her hand paused mid-pour. She didn't look at me when she replied, "You always see the glass half empty, Harper. That's why we worry about you." Worry. As if condescension was a form of love. I moved to the living room when the guests arrived. I stood by the wall, holding a cup I never drank from, smiling politely as people asked about Logan's plans, his talent, his natural charisma. No one asked what I was doing. No one noticed I was there, until Aunt May, always the blunt one, squeezed my arm and said, "Still single, Harp? 36 already? You'd better freeze those eggs, honey. Can't rely on youth forever." A few cousins chuckled. I forced a smile. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, then turned away before they could see the burn behind my eyes. Dinner came and went. Logan gave a speech. People clapped. Dad teared up. Mom took pictures on her phone. There was a toast in Logan's honor, sparkling cider raised high, as if we were christening a ship made of gold and second chances. When they brought out the cake, I slipped upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the music downstairs. The beat thumped through the walls like a pulse I no longer shared. There was laughter. So much laughter. I stared at my old bookshelf. Dog-eared novels. A third place spelling bee ribbon. A cracked snow globe from my first trip to Chicago. Paid for with my own savings from babysitting jobs no one remembered I had. This wasn't a home. It was a museum of things I used to hope for. And I was the exhibit no one visited anymore. A week after the party, Logan moved back into the house. Not temporarily. Not to get on his feet. He brought in boxes, set up a workspace in the dining room, rearranged the living room to make space for client Zooms. One morning, I came down to find my books from the coffee table stacked in a corner, replaced by his branded notebooks and a fancy ring light. "Sorry," he said, casually chewing toast. "Need the space for visuals. Investors are picky about backgrounds." I nodded, numb. 3 days later, Mom handed me a casserole dish and said, "Take this to the neighbors. Logan's allergic to mushrooms, and I accidentally used cream of mushroom." I blinked. "So you made it for me?" "Oh, no, sweetheart," she said. "Just thought you'd be the better one to walk in this weather." Snow was falling hard that day. My boots soaked through. That night I sat in my childhood room and opened the filing box I kept hidden behind the dresser. Inside, among old bank statements and dusty report cards, was the property deed for the house. My name. Only my name. Not Logan's. Not my parents'. Back in 2015, after Grandma June passed, she left me just under $90,000. It wasn't much, but it was enough to repair the roof, replace the wiring, and pay off the last chunk of Dad's second mortgage. At the time, I didn't think twice when the lawyer asked whose name to file under. The house was crumbling, and I wanted to fix it before it fell apart. I didn't realize then I was buying the only thing that would ever truly be mine. Now they acted like it was theirs by blood. They spoke of Logan's startup needing stability, of how moving things around legally could help with tax benefits. I overheard Mom in the laundry room whispering to Dad, "If we just explain it the right way, she'll sign. Harper doesn't like confrontation." Dad agreed. "Just tell her it's for the family. She always caves when we say that." My hand froze mid-fold with the towel. They weren't asking. They were planning. Planning to take what little I had left. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake tracing the ceiling cracks, feeling them like fault lines in my chest. They didn't see me as a person. I was a placeholder, a convenience, a wallet with no spine. I wanted to scream. Instead, I made tea, packed one small bag, pulled the deed out of the file box, and slid it into a manila envelope. Then I sat in the dark for hours, holding that envelope like it was the only proof I existed. Because maybe it was. I left at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. No note, no goodbye, just silence. The sky was still black, but the air carried that strange in-between chill, like even the weather hadn't decided if it wanted to freeze or thaw. I moved quietly like I had done my whole life. The only sound was the zip of my suitcase and the soft creak of the back door closing behind me. Inside my coat pocket, the deed. Folded, protected, alive. I didn't cry. Not when I passed the family photos in the hallway. Not when I looked one last time at the kitchen where I had made soup for my mother while she called Logan her miracle. Not even when I saw my name etched in silver on the mailbox, slightly rusted, still ignored. I drove for 6 hours straight. I didn't plan where to go at first. Just pointed north and kept driving through the white silence of Minnesota's winter. The roads were empty, the kind of empty that makes you wonder if the world noticed you left. It didn't. I ended up in a place called Bemidji, a town small enough that no one asked questions, cheap enough that a woman like me could disappear quietly. I found a rental above a florist shop, 1 bedroom, drafty windows, and a view of a frozen lake that cracked like gunshots every night as the ice shifted. It was perfect. I bought a second-hand coat, changed my number, and told the landlord I'd come from out of state after a messy break. She didn't press. She just handed me the keys and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. For weeks, I didn't speak to anyone unless I had to. I applied for part-time work at the public library, volunteered to help teach reading to kids on Saturdays, watered the plants in the hallway even though no one asked me to. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't joyful, but it was mine. Sometimes I'd sit by the window and watch the snow fall, watch it cover everything evenly. No favoritism, no legacy, just white soft equal. At night, I'd pull out the deed, smooth its creases, run my fingers over my name like it was some fragile truth I had to memorize before it vanished too. Back home, I knew they were panicking, not because they missed me, but because they lost something they thought belonged to them. Logan must have tried calling dozens of times. I never picked up. Then came the emails. We just want to talk. You're being unreasonable. Think of Mom. I deleted them all. 3 months in, a letter arrived at the florist's address. No return name, just my first name scribbled in shaky ink. Inside, a photo of my mother in a hospital gown, pale and frail, and a note. She won't make it through winter without the house. Please, we need it. I stared at the paper for a long time, long enough for my tea to go cold, long enough for the sun to go down, and then I burned it. The next day, I bought a lockbox from the hardware store and placed the deed inside, because sometimes the only way to be seen is to vanish. It had been 5 winters since I disappeared. Bemidji had become a rhythm, quiet, measured. I knew the names of the regulars at the library, could tell which kids struggled with th sounds and which ones just needed glasses. I had a routine, a quiet one, built from nothing but choice. And then he called. It was a Wednesday, late March. The ice on the lake had started to crack, letting small rivers of meltwater run free under the surface. I was brewing tea when my phone, my new phone, with a number no one was supposed to have, buzzed. Unknown caller. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. On the 4th try, I answered. Silence first. Then a breath. Harper. My hand tightened around the mug. Logan. He exhaled, like he didn't believe it was really me. Thank God. I didn't think. Look, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know you're angry. But please don't hang up. I said nothing. His voice cracked. Mom's dying. She's in hospice now. Heart failure. There's nothing more they can do. Still, I didn't speak. She's been asking for you, he added. Begging. She didn't ask for me when she gave you $500,000, I said, voice low. I know. We were wrong. But this isn't about that anymore. I heard him sniff, whether from cold or tears I couldn't tell. Harper, we're going to lose the house. There it was. Not just grief, not just family, but need. The bank won't approve anything without your signature. You still hold the deed. And I get it, you earned it. You saved that house. But please, we're begging you. My mouth was dry. I stared at the window, watched a single crow hop across the snow. You want me to come back. Just long enough to sign. Just enough to keep the house from being taken. For Mom. He paused. For the memory of family. I hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, the steam from my tea rising past my face like smoke from something burning. That night, I dreamed I was a child again, standing in the hallway of the house, calling for my mother. She was in the kitchen, holding Logan, smiling only at him. I was holding a report card, shaking. But she never turned around. She never saw me. I woke up before sunrise, packed a small bag, took the deed out of the lockbox, and placed it in my coat pocket, same as the night I left. The snow had stopped falling, and I was heading home. I arrived just after sunset. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling in places, the shutters sagging slightly. There was a wreath on the door, cheap and faded from last Christmas. The driveway was full of snow untouched. Empty. I didn't knock. I had my own key. Inside, it smelled of lemon cleaner and silence. Logan's coat was hanging by the door. A woman's purse sat on the table. Someone I didn't know. A stranger now lived inside this memory. Logan came downstairs in sweatpants and a hoodie, eyes bleary like he hadn't slept in days. He stopped mid-step when he saw me. You came. I said nothing. He looked thinner, paler, but I didn't feel sorry, just hollow. She's at the hospice, he said after a beat. Dad's there now. I nodded. The papers. He gestured toward the dining table. A manila folder sat neatly at the center, surrounded by untouched mugs of coffee. I recognized the handwriting on the post-it stuck to the cover. "Thank you, Harper. We won't forget this." But I knew better. I signed, without a word, without negotiation. And as my pen left the page, I felt it, the last thread between me and this house, snap. I handed him the folder. Logan took it like a man who had just dodged death. "We'll take care of it," he said. "Don't worry." I turned to leave. "Wait," he said, suddenly awkward. "You want to come to the hospital? She's still awake." I paused and nodded. The hospice was only 10 minutes away, but it felt like another lifetime. Susan Langley lay in a white room surrounded by machines she no longer needed. Her hands looked like paper, her lips dry. She blinked slowly when I walked in. Logan whispered something in her ear. Her eyes moved toward me, but she didn't smile. She didn't speak. She didn't even reach for my hand. Just stared, like I was the ghost that had haunted her hallway all these years, now made flesh. After a long silence, she murmured, "Why did you come?" It wasn't a welcome. It was an accusation. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You asked for me." "No," she said. "He did." She turned away. I stood there, the fluorescent light buzzing above me like a cruel reminder of every second I had spent waiting to be seen. Logan touched my arm. "She's tired. She's not herself." "She's exactly herself," I said. I walked out, and no one followed. Back at the house, I packed my things. The guest room I had slept in had been converted into an office. I was told I could stay in the basement if I needed a place to rest. I didn't. I left before dawn. One last glance at the house from the street. The windows dark, the roof I had once paid to fix now covered in ice. And I realized something. I hadn't lost this home. It had never been mine to begin with. I returned to Bemidji under the same sky I had left it, quiet, pale, and utterly indifferent. The florist downstairs greeted me with a nod. She didn't ask where I'd gone. She never did. I unpacked slowly, folded each shirt as if smoothing over something much older than wrinkles, placed the kettle back on the stove like I had never left. But something had changed. I didn't reach for the deed anymore. There was no need. I had already given the last piece of myself away. In the evenings I walked by the lake. The ice had begun to break, leaving jagged holes like wounds that refused to freeze over. I sat by a bench near the edge and watched the sun dip below the horizon in slow silence. I thought of that house, of the years I scrubbed its floors, repaired its bones, begged for a corner of belonging, only to be told I should be grateful I was allowed to stay. They said I had left them, but the truth is they never let me in. I was just useful, until I wasn't. Back in my apartment, I found the old envelope where I once kept the deed. I opened it, empty now, but I didn't throw it away. I kept it as a reminder, not of what I lost, but of what I gave and how it was never enough. I turned off the lights, let the darkness fill the room, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like crying, just tired, just done, because sometimes the most powerful thing a forgotten daughter can do is walk away, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in silence so absolute it echoes forever. I returned to Bemidji under the same sky I had left it, quiet, pale, and utterly indifferent. The streets were lined with slush now instead of snow, and the lake was beginning to break apart in soft cracks that whispered through the trees. No one asked where I had gone. The florist downstairs gave me a nod. I nodded back. In my apartment, everything was just as I had left it. The dried lavender still hung above the kitchen sink. My books were stacked neatly by the window. The tea I hadn't finished still sat in its tin, sealed and untouched, like a time capsule waiting for someone who never came home. I unpacked slowly. Each item I folded was a ritual, a reclaiming, a quiet reminder that I was still here, still breathing, even if I no longer knew why. I didn't reach for the deed. There was no need. It no longer belonged to me, legally or emotionally. That house had never really been mine. I had mistaken labor for love, sacrifice for significance, silence for belonging. But the truth was clear now. I was never a daughter in their eyes. I was a fixture, a function, a body that made life easier for everyone else. And when I stepped away, the only thing they missed was what I gave, not who I was. That truth hurt more than any betrayal, because it had always been true. I just refused to see it. Some nights I sat by the lake, watched the ice melt, fracture, float. There was something beautiful about it, how nature didn't force things to hold that were ready to come apart. I started doing small things differently. I bought a plant, a new one, not the practical kind, but the wild, spiky kind that blooms once and dies. I baked banana bread and gave it to the librarian's daughter, who hugged me like I mattered. I taught a class on memoir writing at the community center. One of the students said, "You have the saddest smile I've ever seen." I didn't know whether to thank her or apologize. And then one night I pulled out the old manila envelope, the one where the deed used to live. I held it for a while, just stared. Empty now, it felt heavier than it ever had before. Not because of what it once contained, but because of everything it no longer had to carry. I could have thrown it out. I didn't. I placed it gently back in the drawer, closed it, and turned off the light. Sometimes I wonder if they ever talk about me. If Logan tells people I left the family. If Dad says I ran off. If Mom, in her final moments, ever regretted not holding my hand. But then I remember. They only loved me when I gave, never when I stayed. And now I've stopped giving. And I've stopped staying. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a forgotten daughter can do is walk away. Not in anger, not in vengeance, but in silence so absolute. It echoes forever,